worked at it 24/7 pretty much. And again, the addition with Dan's engineering skill, and we started applying some of that stuff, and started seeing the benefit of it. And Dan was a great math guy and everything else. I was a great race car guy, or a decent race car guy. I don't want to say great, but a decent race car guy. And we was able to combine the two. And we figured out a lot of things. Like that particular year, Goodyear came out with a tire. We called it a Formula One sidewall, but it was a flush mount sidewall. I mean, stiff. It was a really, really stiff deal. And we was at Rockingham testing. I think that was a repave too. The year they repaved. But anyway, we was at Rockingham testing, and nobody could get those cars to turn with that sidewall. So I kept looking at it, and something that Kawicki had told me, he said, pay it, read your tires, know your tires. So I kept looking at this thing and going back and forth, and I'm like, why is this thing, showing so hot on the inside? And I kept pulling camber out, and it made it worse. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I went in the truck and found a route for an A-frame that was like an inch longer. I mean, back in those days, we had a standard. I think we ran like 7 1/4, 7.5 inch A-frames. I went out there and got an inch longer A-frame, and I bolted on that thing. Basically took all the camber out of it. And man, this thing lit up. Chad said, oh my, this thing will turn on a dime and give you a nickel back. And I mean, it was huge speed. And then, so from there, man, we had something that nobody else had really got onto at the time. And, man, I think we beat Mark Martin at Rockingham that day by like 10 seconds. We had like a 10-second. I mean, we whooped them big. Mike Agee was doing our engines then, Larry Wallace and Mike Agee. So we had really good engines too.
So with all the engineering stuff and from Dan and the hardcore racer in you, how close were you getting to the edge of the envelope when it came to the rules and everything? Were you just right up to it? Did you obey the rules, or were you looking at that line in your rear view mirror?
I pushed it. I pushed it really hard.
How hard did you push it?
Well, if they had templates, I was going behind wherever it was, and if it was supposed to be this wide right here, I'd go back 6 inches, and it was going to be 4 inches wider. So it was all gray area stuff that I pushed. Never blatantly cheated. Never just blatantly broke the rules. But I studied the rule book every single day, so I knew every rule that there was. I was at Rockingham whenever the first H template, the first C-post template came out. And, I remember Buster taking a piece of plywood and cutting it out around a stock Grand Prix and putting it around the back glass over the C-post. And whenever I saw him do that, I went back and told Bill Ingles, I'm like, Bill, if that's what's supposed to fit our car, that ain't going to happen, Captain. He goes, well, they just made the thing here, so we'll just do what we got to do. Well, took our car through tech. It was like 3 inches narrow on each side, where we had everything pulled in to get more rear downforce. So, I studied that rule book 24/7. And every time that they came out with a rule, I would do whatever I had to do to not lose that speed. So if I knew that, if they were widening one out here, then I would narrow it somewhere else. I would do whatever I had to do to not lose anything.
Yeah.
And I pushed them to make a lot of new templates.
So that year, 95 in particular, he, like I said, he had this monumental first 2/3 of the season, but then kind of fell off the cliff. the last couple of months of the season?
Well, we had some engine failures.
Okay.
That was
Yeah.
our biggest deal. It's been a long time ago, so I can't remember the exact performance. But we, as far as like good days, bad days, whatever. But we were still fast everywhere that we went. We had speed, but we got in a couple of wrecks, and then we had some engine failures, and that's where Johnny Benson ended up beating us for the championship. Was that those engine failures is what got us.
Yeah. The following season, you wound up as crew chief. Mm-hmm. Was that something that you had been working toward, or did that just kind of happen and somebody said, "Hey, Tag, you're it"?
No. I've been the previous year. Gary Cogswell was the crew chief, but in those days, like you had Barry Dotson that was a crew chief that made all the race day calls and whatnot. But you had Jimmy Maycar that was the chassis specialist. He's the one that did all the handling stuff with Rusty and that's in my mind. Then I looked up at Jimmy Maycar. I was like, that guy is the man. That's who I want to be. Because Jimmy was just so smart. Whenever I worked for Alan, and we would be beside Rusty in the garage, I would watch Jimmy Maycar. I watched him like a hawk. I thought he was the smartest guy, and that's who I wanted to be. And that's kind of how race teams operated in. Well, as the next year, whenever they promoted me to crew chief, I was still doing the same job, but they moved Gary to general manager. So Gary handled all the business stuff, everything like that. And then I took care of all the, chassis, handling, racing side of everything.
You worked with Chad in '96 in the Busch Series with Greg and Pollux as the team owner, and then you moved with him to Roush Racing in '97 as the Cup crew chief. What was that move like? The difference between divisions?
Oh, terrible.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it was. There was several factors that led for me to make a comment like that. It was hard, but the big thing was there was some things that I didn't understand at the time. We came out of Ford and went to a Pontiac. Well, that Pontiac had so much rear downforce on it compared to what the Ford did. Every note that we had, everything, it was like not even in the same realm of what you had to do to get the balance back on those cars. So we made that transition from 95 to 96. My first year crew chiefing with that Pontiac, man, we struggled. And we, towards the end of the year, last 8 or 10 races, I finally started getting some things figured out, and I don't think we ran out of the top 5 in those races. Well, then when we went to the Cup deal, and the horsepower stepped up, and the game stepped up, and everybody was good. It took a while to figure those things out. And, I mean, even way back then, like that thing had so much rear downforce that. Pretty much the standard at Charlotte was a 300, 400 rear spring, 325. Well, we was over there testing with that Sterling Cowboy car. I had an 800-pound spring in the right rear back then.
Wow.
And that thing we was just flying over there. I think we ended up sitting on the pole or outside pole for that All-Star race, and oil pump broke on the first lap. Oil pump belt flew off. But that was understanding the aero balance was a huge thing, at that time.
All right. 1998, you spent most of the year with Joe Bessie, but then you worked the last handful of races with Jason Keller at Progressive Motorsports. Was the deal with Jeff Green already on the table at that point, or did that come later?
It came later. So when I worked with Joe that short period of time, and then Greg Pollux had sold the team to Jack, and so I went to work for Joe for that year, and then Greg called me, and well, it was at Charlotte, matter of fact. Greg came to see me. He said, "Hey man, I'm gonna start another race team. Are you interested in coming back?" I said, "You say when."
Really?
Because I love Greg Pollux, man. He was great, still do. So Joe found out, saw me and Greg talking. He knew what was coming, so he pretty much told me to go on. And so that's how I ended up over there for the last few races.
1999, you came into your own as crew chief, and Jeff came into his own as a driver. How quickly did the two of you get on the same page?
Quick.
I asked him that same question. He said, when I went into the first turn of the first lap.
Well, it kind of started before that. Scott Mercer was Michelle's cousin. But anyway, Scott and I worked at Bahari together. So that's how I met Jeff, was through Scott Mercer. And I started following Jeff, started watching him, and I thought he was an awesome race car driver. And Chad got hurt. He hit the fence at Charlotte and broke his shoulder and his leg. And we had to have somebody to start, to fill in Chad could start the car. Myrtle Beach was our next race, and had a couple of weeks off, so we had time to get prepared for it. So I talked him into getting Jeff to do it, because Jeff was so great at Nashville, and Myrtle Beach has got some of the same characteristics. And Jeff, he came there, and Chad started the race and ran till the first caution. And the first caution came at like lap 30. Well, we got Chad out and put Jeff in and lost a lap. And Jeff got in that thing, unlapped himself, and drove all the way back to third. And while we were there practicing, that was the first time Jeff and I really got to work together. And when he was driving, he started calling me the shock doctor, because that was when Penske was first coming out with rebuildable shocks. And he would tell me this, and I'd take a shock apart and put it back together, and Jeff was just like, "Oh man, ain't it?" Yeah. So it started clicking. That was where it first got going. But when Jeff, and as a matter of fact, whenever we started that whole deal over there with PPC, Tim Feeder was supposed to drive. Well, it ended up being a conflict with Kleenex, and something went down. They wouldn't let Tim do it. And then whenever they wouldn't let him do it, Greg asked me, he said, "Who you want?" And I said, "I want Jeff Green." And he said, "Well, I had this guy in mind." I said, "No, I want Jeff Green." And he said, "Okay, well, if that's what you want," he said, "let's see if we can track him down." So I went to searching him down, and actually we found him in a tree stand in Kentucky. He was hunting. And,
Surely not Jeff.
Yeah, he was in a tree stand in Kentucky, and so he came. He agreed to do the deal, and man, from day one, I thought he was the best. The best of the best.
You won 3 races that year, Nashville, Myrtle Beach, and Memphis. You had been a part of wins before, but this time you were the crew chief.
Mm-hmm.
What did that mean to you?
It was big, but I was still so focused on getting better and everything. That win would last for me for that night. After we got the celebration party over that night, the next day I forgot we'd even won a race. I was so focused on trying to get better and move to the next deal. It was a little while before I looked back and said, man, we won some races.
End of the year, you were second to Dale Jr. in points. Were you satisfied with that, or did that tick you off for the next year?
No, I wasn't satisfied at all. I was mad. I was ill because we missed that race at Rockingham.
Right.
And I don't know, I don't think, if you just did the math, I still don't think that would have won us the championship.
Right. Yeah.
But so many things evolve. I mean, we were fast, and I think we were P1 or P2 or top 3 whenever we were there. But if we'd have been in that race, who's to say we wouldn't have pushed him and he wouldn't have wrecked? You know what I mean? I don't mean wreck him. I mean just pushing him hard enough to,
right.
You know what I'm saying? So I was a little ill about that, and man, we had a group of guys that totally believed in Jeff. They totally believed in the system that I'd put in place at the time, and I called them soldiers because they were. I mean, these guys, they would work 24/7. There was nothing else. There was no hobbies. Nobody wanted to play tennis, play golf. Nobody wanted to do anything like that. All we did was, even if we had a day off, we were all at the race shop. But we never, ever took a day off. And we were bound and determined to. And Mark Martin was our mark in Busch Series. That guy was hard to beat.
Yeah.
And, we kept working until we could beat him. And then whenever we figured out that he was beatable, then it made us want to work even harder.
Jeff took the lead pretty early that season, and he kept it the rest of the way, and it kept growing the rest of the season. The lead in the point standings kept growing. How hard was it to keep everybody from easing up on the throttle and coasting a little bit? Because, with 3 months left in the season, you had a 500-point lead.
Kenny with the reception, first down.
It wasn't really that hard because we raced to win. And from the big picture standpoint, like Greg used to get on to me sometimes because that we would push so hard. He's like, look at where you're at, man. Look at what we're trying to do. I said, we're trying to win races. I said, we win the races, the points will come. He said, yeah, but you don't need to push it too hard and cause yourself trouble. I'm like, I'll deal with that whenever that happens. But our job's to win the race, and that's the way we did it. We attacked, like we was on the attack all the time. If we didn't beat them off the truck, if we didn't beat them through tech, if we wasn't first quick in practice, if we wasn't first quick on the average, if we didn't win the race and lead all the laps, we had something to do. And every one of those that we didn't accomplish each week, Dan was really good at making detailed notes, and I was too. We went in and started filling the gaps. What caused us to not be first quick in practice? Well, we unloaded. What caused us to be a half a tenth off here? And between Dan and myself, we'd sit down and get back and look at every one of those small gaps, and we'd fill that space in. We did something to correct that. To correct every mark, and that 2000 year, it paid off. It worked out.
All right, so this is a very important question. Who had the best hair on that team?
Oh, I did.
I can't do an interview and not mention your just epic mullet.
Yeah, mullets are cool. I'd still have one today, but as you get older and your body changes a little bit, I'd start looking like Meatloaf. So I had to shorten it up some.
When I talked to Jeff, he said and remembered you guys winning at Myrtle Beach that year. And he said that they pretty much tore your car down to
South Boston. That was South Boston.
Nuts and bolts.
Oh, yeah. We put it back in the truck on frame wheels.
And they were looking for evidently traction control.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to that? Well, first question is, did you have traction control?
No, sir.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
All right.
And I'll shoot you straight honestly. I didn't even know what it was at the time. I really didn't. After they went to looking so hard, I started doing some research, and I was like, well, okay, now I know what they're after. But it's kind of funny story, but Mike Darby and Mike Helton pulled Green and I in the trailer after we won the race.
At South Boston?
At South Boston. And, because we were running, for us to finish out of the top 5, we had to wreck or something. And Mike pretty much told me he'd come there to get us, because they was convinced that we had traction control. Everybody had complained to them, and in their defense, they was getting so many complaints that they was convinced.
Now, was this before or after the race?
This is after the race.
After? Okay.
Yes, sir. And so Darby told me, he said, this is what we're getting ready to do. He said, I'm getting ready to put your car on the ground. And I said, yes, sir. I said, well, tell me what you want. He said, I want the motor out. I want the windshields out. I want all the lead out of the rails. I want the calipers off the car. I want all the suspension off. I want the transmission out, rear end. I want everything laid out on the ground. All the wiring, dash, battery. I said, yes, sir. So I went over and told my guys, I said, all right, y'all get the toolbox polished up because we get ready to do some work. And they stripped that thing all the way down to where it was nothing but a shell. There was no seat, no belts, no brake lines, no dash, wiring, battery, suspension. Then at that time, we didn't have monoblock calipers. We had 2-piece brake calipers. They made me split the brake calipers apart, took the transmission apart, took the rear gear apart. They took every single solitary piece of that thing apart. And when we put it back in the truck, I had frame wheels that you'd slide in the frame rails to, roll them in one if you got in a wreck too bad for it to roll. So that's how we had to push the thing in the truck. And the truck was just piled with parts. Like that thing was disassembled completely. And so after they got it all tore apart, they looked and they took the ignition boxes and the wiring and all that. They took that with them. And so when we went in the trailer, Green and I were sitting in there, and Mike's like, I come here to get you. He said, y'all are the way y'all are running, we're just having a hard time, and we're getting enough complaints to where, we got to look, and we're doing. I said, Mr. Hilton, I said, what are you looking for? He said, we're looking for traction control. I said, Mr. Hilton, I said, you're looking in the wrong spot. He said, what are you talking about? I said, man, you're looking in the wrong spot. All that work out there. I said, hell, right there it is. It's in his shoe. He looked at us, said, y'all get the hell out of my office. It's kind of funny, but
wow.
So we took that thing in baskets back to the shop, put it together, reassembled everything, had to put all new wiring and dash in it, and then of course they sent everything off and everything was legal. And went to Myrtle Beach the next week and whooped them again. And then they just rolled us through tech, checked us like normal, patted us on the back, said, good job, guys. So, they were pretty cool with us after that, but they sure wouldn't give us nothing. Then they had a template block where, you had an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. It was like red, blue, green, stepped template block. And Darby would come to me every week. He's like, hey, your greens are blues. Your blues are reds. So when everybody else was, if they gave him a 1/2 inch, I was getting a 1/4. And so That was fun.
This is basically as raced. It's a 429 Hemi, and it runs. That's Leonard, and that's the same lathe and the same bench.
This came from Dan Gurney in 1969.
That thing turned sideways. Now I'm looking out the side glass knowing we're going to crash.
Sports. We're at the Wood Brothers Museum in Stewart, Virginia, where they have the most comprehensive collection of artifacts and stories of any race team museum we have ever filmed to date.
That's it?
Yeah, this is it. This is all we use. So it's basically like you're talking to us and I just hold this here.
That's
and
easy.
Where did the Wood Brothers start and where do you guys fall into that?
Our dad drove, and Leonard was the mechanic. Delano and Ray Lee helped. They come on Sundays and helped at night. They used to work at night a lot because they all had other jobs. My dad was a sawmiller. Leonard worked at a Ford dealership. Ray Lee, he was into heavy equipment like bulldozers and things, and Delano worked at a sawmill.
So you see all the buildings over there. Where did that shop on stilts come from? Was it already in the family or was it purchased to use for racing?
Daddy rented it. So I'll call it the first place was the home place. They had like a shed for 2 cars under a beech tree. And the beech tree is where they would throw a chain over a limb to pull the engine out.
Is that the actual tree limb crane mechanism?
When Daddy cleaned out the old shop, he put stuff on carts. Uncle Delano comes in here one day. He'd been back there rumbling around. He rolls his cart up here. And he says, "You know what this is, don't you?" And I was kind of a smart aleck. "Yeah, it's an engine hoist." "It's not just an engine hoist. It's the engine hoist." "Okay." Changed my attitude right there. And I said, "I should get Daddy to go up in the woods and cut a tree limb down, make it look like it's growing out of the wall." He had a guy cut that out of the beech tree. So that's a limb out of the beech tree.
The same tree.
The tree.
Wow.
It's not the limb, because the limb is that big around now. But that's a hoist. And Eddie and John got the name off of it. And I think that company went out of business in 1928. So the hoist had to have been used when they got it in 50 area. First shop when they outgrew the home place was this one, which Daddy rented in 1950s. Late 50s, like 53 or 4. And in 56, Daddy built this shop.
So this building that we're standing in right now was the race shop after 96, like 96 and 03.
We moved in here fall of 95. Our dad, basically, this was his playroom. It was on him to make the museum part of it. We was working on race cars and building cars to go to Daytona for that year, and he just started hanging pictures in here. And all these pictures, I don't know where they came from. I don't know where they were until they got in here. Mom kept everything picture-wise, or any articles or anything like that. She kept all that, and he framed them too. Every one of them, pretty much. Yeah, but he would come in here with had him a ladder, and had him a little hammer, and I'll show you the thing he measured. He didn't have a tape measure. He had I guess a carpenter's rule. There was his hammer. So it's brand new, you can see. It's not. We think it might have been his mother's hammer. Okay, show me. Yeah, so that's how you. That was Daddy's tape measure.
Wow.
Did he use that for everything?
Yeah, everything. Well, at least you didn't, when you stuck it up there, you didn't have to worry about it flopping back over you. You didn't think about it. That works better than you might think.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But that's what carpenters used back in the day.
I think it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff on the walls that aren't even Wood Brothers related, just other significant figures of racing.
Friends.
I think that's just pretty cool.
This, whatever, like this is a case kind of honoring Neil Bonnet. Got 3 of his uniforms, one of his helmets,
just things that, you know, were related to him. Kyle Petty. Yeah, and there's Kyle. That helmet actually was the one Kyle used at Richmond, first race he ever won. That's a picture of him down at the bottom in the car with that helmet on. When you keep stuff like that, you want to have a picture to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just and we've tried to do that.
So that's Kyle and Adam and Richard.
This picture right here is Adam Petty and John and Austin Petty when Kyle was driving our car.
Oh wow. So you guys are like two family organizations, and you were kind of like,
Yeah, they said it would
Tight.
never. They said it would never work when, you know, Kyle came to drive here, but that's probably the most fun I've ever had. So, you know, he was here from '85 through '88, and that's probably the